Good morning, dear colleagues. We start our working day. Today we will rather urgently report to you on what's happening in the east of Ukraine, whether the sides are keeping to the regime of ceasefire. And I invite here to speak Vladyslav Seleznyov, who's a spokesperson for the General Staff of Ukraine, and Anatoliy Stelmakh, the spokesperson for the anti-terrorist operation, will be on the phone link with us, and also will call Vyacheslav Bruskin, who is head of General Administration of the Ministry of Interior in Donetsk region, with Alexander Honcharenko, who is the officer of the armed forces. He's in Debaltsevo. He'll tell us about what's going on in Debaltsevo. At noon, we will have the briefing of the OSCE representative. At 12:30, Colonel Andrei Lysenko, and at 1 p.m., Pavlo Klimkin, the Minister for Foreign Affairs. So now, Vladyslav Seleznyov. Good morning, dear colleagues. It is 9 hours and 28 minutes that the regime of ceasefire was holding in Ukraine. Over this year, in the zone of the anti-terrorist operation, the regime of artillery silence is generally kept in the east of Ukraine, starting from midnight on the 15th of February. The uncontrolled armed formations have locally and non-systematically conducted some disturbing fire. Chernuhina was shelled 3 times and Zolotet 2 times. There are no losses among the Ukrainian military over the last 24 hours, and from the from 3 a.m. there were no shelling of our positions. Also, I have to remind you that there's a juxtaposition in the informational space between the members of the conflict, and last night the terrorists have blamed the anti-terrorist operation forces in the violation of the regime of ceasefire. The militants of the DNR have issued 2 statements. However, it is characteristic that even before the regime of silence started, the self-proclaimed republics announced 2 briefings. Anatoly, we hear you well, so we listen to what's happening over the last night and how the last day before the ceasefire was going on. At midnight today, the regime of ceasefire started in Donbass. However, we should mark that the last 24 hours were the hottest over the recent months of anti-terrorist operation. The terrorists have moved their forces to the city of Debaltsevo and tried to surround the positions of Ukrainian military at any price. The courage and professionalism of our fighters has not allowed the enemy to implement their plans. In general, over the last 24 hours, the enemy has shelled the positions of the anti-terrorist operation forces and peaceful residential locations 167 times. The terrorists have inflicted 31 artillery blows. They have 38 times shelled our troops from mortars, 26 times from Grad batteries, and 6 from tanks. The most severe battles were in and around the settlements Debaltsevo, Kamenka, Chernuhina. In Mariupol sector, next to the settlement Shirokino, the forces of the armed of the anti-terrorist operation, several times successfully repelled the enemy attacks. During the severe juxtaposition, the illegal armed formations have suffered significant losses over the last 2 days. Over 600 terrorists were killed, another 200 got wounded. The enemy forces have lost 30 armored vehicles. After midnight, the enemy has decreased their activity. However, the shelling of the positions of Ukrainian military in the Debaltseve sector have continued next to Zolote and Luhansk. They were firing from mortars. Chernuhivka and Sanzharivka were fired at from the small firearms and grenade launchers. Also, Zolote, Popasna, Chernuhina were shelled twice from artillery. Besides, there's a new information. In spite of Minsk agreements, even now the terrorists continue to provoke the anti-terrorist operation forces to fire in response. These minutes, the gunmen, with the help of tanks, are trying to storm the positions of the anti-terrorist operation forces next to Chernuhina. Besides, they have shelled the camps of our military in the vicinity of Debaltseve this morning. Is it all for the moment? Yes, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Your questions, colleagues. A very simple question. The regime of silence, as far as I understand, provides for the full abstention from use of force, but still the shelling continues. What is the measure of shelling so that the response is taken? First of all, this is the responsibility of the Commander-in-Chief, Superior Commander-in-Chief. Yesterday, the Commander-in-Chief, the head of the General Staff, has published the list of conditions where the Ukrainians will fire in response. First, this is a intentional fire, and the fire against settlements. What we see tonight is that this was provoking, disturbing fire, which was not systemic. 9 of the shellings was in the vicinity of the Debaltseve bridgehead. We'll see how the headquarters of the anti-terrorist operation will react, but the decision will be adequate and it will be adopted according to the situation. As of today, the forces of the anti-terrorist operation are ready to meet any challenges that there are, and if the highest military and political leadership of the country adopts the decision to change the format in which the forces of the anti-terrorist operation are now, then we will be ready to act respectively. We will now be able to talk to Vyacheslav Brodskin, who is in the Debaltseve, as far as I know, or next to it. And we will ask him what's going on. Thank you, Anatoly. We'll talk to the Debaltseve now. Take care of yourself, take care of the guys. I'd like to say that the morale of our fighters is high. We're keeping to our positions, and we are ready to any decision of the highest military and political command of the country. So let's connect to Vyacheslav Broskin.
Vladyslav, good morning. This is Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. You are just on the air now. Good morning. Good morning once again. We just talked to Anatoliy Stelmakh. He actually informed us about the general situation in the ATO zone. You are somewhere off Debaltseve. Can you add something new? I mean, breaking news, what's going on there? As of yesterday till midnight, February 24, the rebels actually were destroying the Debaltseve city. They shelled and bombarded the residential buildings, different other structures and their facilities. After midnight, the battle ended. Over the night, I mean, in the early hours of the morning till this point of time, there was some kind of firing from the firearms, some kind of single shots on the part of the rebels. And generally speaking, the situation is rather stable. As regards different territory of Donetsk Oblast, as of yesterday, again in the afternoon, in the evening, they shelled the checkpoints in Marinka. There were some of the residential buildings damaged. One of the peaceful civilian was killed. And there were some shellings of the settlement of Shirokino, or the village of Shirokino, but after midnight, again, I repeat myself, the situation is rather stable now. That's the information regarding the Donetsk Oblast. If anything, we are going to try to dial a number to get maybe some news later on. Take care. Thank you. Colleagues, in a minute we are going to have another officer to dial another officer from the Armed Forces of Ukraine just to get some new information about that.